And hello to everyone who's joining. I'm going to wait just a couple more moments until we've settled in terms of attendees, and then we'll get going. Okay, well, I think we'll make a start, and others may join as we start this discussion. Welcome everybody today. This is our last SCL Women in Tech Law session of the year, and everyone is very welcome. Today we're talking on the tech law horizon, what's coming up in 2022. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Sue McLean. I'm a partner in Baker McKenzie's technology group and trustee and vice chair here at SCL. And in this session, we thought we would take some time to reflect on this year and also take a bit of a look forward and perhaps make some predictions about what we're going to be facing in 2022. I'm sure as many of us have experienced across the sector, 2021 was another boom year for technology, with the pandemic continuing to act as a catalyst for digital transformation across all parts of industry. But as ever, it's also been a very busy year for us as tech lawyers in terms of continued legal and regulatory developments. We've had major litigation, potential class action cases. We've had in Europe the decision in Schrems II, which has led to big changes in data privacy, and the continued sort of GDPRization, if that is even a word, of rules around the world, with more and more countries looking to tackle data privacy concerns. But we've also had, policymakers in the UK and the EU announce plans on how to tackle various new technologies from AI, FinTech, crypto assets, always something new to deal with. And also, obviously, the continued debate around topics such as competition and online harms. So there's an awful lot going on. So we thought, what better than to get 3 tech law experts to join us to chat through these topics and get their insights on what they've been seeing this year and what might be coming. And so I'm really delighted to be joined today by our 3 speakers. I'm just going to give you a short run through and who they are and what they do. We've got Karishma Brahmbhatt, who's a senior associate in Allen and Overy's London office. And Karishma advises on a variety of matters concerning technology and data privacy, whether that's digital transformation, data strategy, AI, ad tech, lots to keep her busy. We've also got Todd, who's a senior solicitor at Macfarlanes, and Anne represents customer and supply side clients on all aspects of technology, telecommunications, digital infrastructure, and digital transformation and data privacy. Anne is really a very rounded lawyer. She understands very well the challenges of businesses navigating these types of issues, because she is herself a former in-house lawyer and general counsel and has worked at some of our leading technology and communications companies. And we also have Yvonne Dunn. Yvonne is a partner who leads the Pinsent Mason's financial services technology practice. She spends a lot of her time advising on outsourcing, systems development and integration, and IT procurement, and also leads the firm's FinTech practice, advising on really interesting complex projects which combine technology and the regulatory environment in which financial services clients operate. So a lot of experience here, lots of interesting areas to cover. I have got questions for our speakers, but I'm sure that you will also have ideas or questions or issues you'd like to raise. So we'd love for you to join in. We're going to use the Q&A function. So if you've got questions, please pose them using that tool, and I'll try as best as I can to weave them into our discussion as we go, and hopefully we'll also have some time at the end for some further questions. But I'm gonna kick us off. I'm gonna start with you, Karishma, if I may, because I think there's always since 2018 there's been lots and lots of further developments in the data protection world, but this year has been one of those years where there's just been an awful lot of activity as we've had to rethink how we deal with certain issues We've had the fallout from Schrems II. We've had, you know, post-Brexit, we're still dealing with Brexit. We've had to deal with the UK GDPR adequacy decision, and also, you know, the prospect of class actions really affecting the area of data protection and the remedies that are available. So, but I'm really keen to understand from you, someone who deals with this space a lot, what for you do you think were the most significant data protection developments this year, and what's been really, you know, keeping you and your clients busy?
Well, Sue, where do I begin? You've already alluded to the whirlwind of activity on the data protection front over the last year or so. And I guess the most significant development from a BAU practice type perspective has to be the latest chapters of the international data transfer saga. So of course, the Schrems II case was decided last year, and then earlier this year in June, the European Commission issued its new standard contractual clauses, this time also covering transfers made by processors. And then that sort of fired the starting gun, as it were, on companies starting to update their international data transfer mechanisms in earnest and to carry out the numerous transfer impact assessments before they can actually continue transferring any data outside of the EU or EEA. And also all of this was sort of propelled by the fact that the very initial deadline for starting to implement these new measures was the 27th of September. So everyone had a fun summer period. I'm sure all of these in-house data protection lawyers in particular having to grapple with the myriad of supply chain contracts that would have to be updated, or the newly negotiated contracts that would have to be updated. And then on top of that, of course, in August, the ICO had launched its consultation on its proposed version of the SCCs. And in that consultation, they introduced their draft of the International Data Transfer Agreement, as well as an addendum to the EU SCCs and a transfer risk assessment. So introducing lots of new acronyms to describe more or less the same things that the EU already has in place. And whilst we haven't had a final version of those ICO documents, it did start to get everyone thinking about how they would approach implementing the UK version of these international data transfer agreements and how they'd be carrying out their assessments going forwards. And most importantly, perhaps how they could reduce the administrative burden as and when the ICO's documents do come into force. I know you also mentioned class action, so I'm going to briefly mention the headline grabbing one, which I'm sure is the one that you were referring to. So the Lloyd and Google case was the showstopper, and we had a number of clients who were poised to pounce in the event that the judgment had opened the floodgates for class actions. But thankfully for data controllers everywhere, the Supreme Court did unanimously clamp down on that and refuse that particular representative action to proceed. And then in terms of what's been keeping me busy, I guess it's all of the above. But as we all know, data typically goes hand in hand with technology. And this year, client interest in the draft AI regulation and connected devices has kept me pretty busy. And then on top of that, I've been doing a lot of work on the privacy aspects of engaging in online behavioral advertising and ad tech, because after a brief hiatus during the lockdowns, well, at least during the first lockdown, both OBA and ad tech are firmly back onto the regulatory agenda. And we're also seeing privacy rights campaigners becoming more vocal and active in this space. So over this year alone, we've seen people realize that e-privacy rules apply to the use of cookies and other trackers in emails. We've seen regulatory ransom notes from the likes of NOYB threatening to report select organizations to data protection authorities if they don't like the way their cookie banners look or the way that their cookie banners work. And we've seen fines, or at least threatened fines, against the online advertising industry's trade body, so the IAB, as well as against big tech like Amazon, who has been threatened with the 746 million euro fine from the Lux DPA. So there's been quite a lot going on over the last 12 months on the data protection front.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and that's, I mean, it's obviously a great area for if there's people on the phone that are students that are thinking about, you know, what to do. I always say, you know, there's no going back on data privacy, right? That if you want to find an area where you're always going to have work, then it's the data protection space, because as you say, we've had, you know, we've had, how do we just deal with the business as usual? You know, now that we've got these new SECs, how do we deal with all the practical stuff of just getting, you know, the new regime sorted for what you currently do? But then people want to continue to use data in new and interesting ways. So there's all the product counseling type, you know, advice where you're trying to navigate these rules for clients, you know, because they want to take advantage of the new technologies and do more interesting things with data. So it's kind of, yeah, it's the, I suppose in the Yvonne's kind of, you know, world, it's the kind of run the organization, run the bank, but then it's also change the bank or change the organization, what we're going to do going forward. And often that involves data, which means that we need the likes of, you know, Karishma and others, including Yvonne and Anne, who do data privacy work, to wrap their heads around this sort of more, you know, continuing complex area of law and how you match up with the practical realities of business. So I think that's a really great start, and maybe that's a segue into coming to you, Yvonne. Obviously, your focus is on tech in the financial services sector, and that, you know, we talk about data privacy rules and regulations and guidance coming out all the time. Well, you know, it's absolutely the case in financial services. There's constantly, you know, new rules, new legislation, whether it's in the UK or in the EU. So for you, if we put data protection aside, what do you think have been the most significant legal regulatory developments you've seen in the sort of subsector of financial services or FinTech in this year, and what particularly thorny topics have your clients been wrangling with?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's fair to say we've had a busy old time in 2021 again. And I think many of the topics that we'll probably get to and you know, that Karishma touched on, like AI and crypto, you know, have obviously impacted the financial services sector as well. I think the one that I would say that's been particularly dominant through this year has been the sector's response to change in regulation around outsourcing and third-party risk and operational resilience. That's been a big feature. And I guess from that, what I'm talking about is ongoing implementation of the European Banking Authority's outsourcing guidelines, the response to the PRA's, the Bank of England supervisory statement on outsourcing and third-party risk and operational resilience. So, you know, these rule sets coming out and the response to that has been a big feature. All of them have implications for financial services clients and those who supply to them. And the bit where we tend to get involved is therefore how it impacts supplier relationships and contracts. Speaking as the external lawyer, and focusing, I suppose, on that, 2021 has really been about clients getting to grips with these rules and how they impact on contracts. And I think that's manifested in three main ways. The first is that clients have been and continue to be engaged in remediation type activity. So they're trying to make sure that their existing contracts that they've already got in force align to these rules. They're obviously also updating their templates to make sure that new arrangements are going to be compliant and they don't have to do remediation. And also, obviously, new deals that are being done, new projects that are being embarked on are being aligned to the rules. And so there's that consequent need to bring the suppliers along the journey. And so I think if we look ahead into 2022, I think there's going to be more of this. The EBA deadline is officially the 31st of December, although in the UK, the FCA has said they don't expect to hear from firms until March on it, and so that's given a bit more time in the UK. And the PRA doesn't have that same kind of long stop deadline attached to it, but remediation needs to happen whenever a contract's being opened up and extended, and we all know that happens a lot. So yeah, that's going to be a feature, I think. And I guess just a couple of other quick things that I think will come into focus in 2022 that have been there this year, but have probably got pushed a bit further back because of that focus on remediation and outsourcing. The first of these is that the PRA's supervisory statement wasn't just about outsourcing, unlike the European rules. It covers all material third-party contracts. And so that alignment and remediation that I was talking about needs to happen across a broader range of contracts. So you can't kind of have the flow chart that we perhaps used to have that started with the question, is it an outsourcing? And if the answer was no, everybody moved along, nothing to see here. I'm afraid, you know, that we need to take a deeper look at some of that. And the second one that's perhaps been there, but in slightly more in the shadows, is that point I mentioned around operational resilience. I mean, it's a topic in itself, and it's a topic that's been there, but it's been in a bit of a silo, I think, in a number of businesses. What we're talking about there is managing the risk of disruption. So it's not saying you won't have disruption, it's just managing the risk of it and how you deal with it. And I think 2022 will be the year where that and contract requirements come together better and the silo is broken. And so what we're talking about there would be tying into things like service levels, service failure strategies, business continuity, exit planning, all of the things that we have in contracts, but linking those two things more closely. So yeah, busy old time. I don't think that's going to change next year, and that's before we get into some of the stuff around, you know, potential regulation of suppliers, you know, under, you know, DORA and all of that. But I'll pause there, and we can pick up some of that stuff as we go.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and I do work for both customers and suppliers, so in this space, and as I'm sure a few of us do, and that's where you can see what the rules are, but it's the operational challenge of meeting some of those rules, particularly for the cloud providers that, you know, provide a one-to-many service that, you know, despite their protestations to the likes of the EBA that some of these rules don't quite work, the rules are there, and therefore there's kind of risk analysis on both sides in terms of how closely you need to stick to those rules, how much flex there is to move away from them. So it's an interesting area, and I think it has been the same with a bunch of these regulators. It has been under more scrutiny in a way because of the pandemic, because of the risk of interruption of business continuity concerns, and also I think especially in the financial services sector, because of a proliferation of new entrants and new third-party suppliers and different types of organizations, and some of the challenges that have come with that. So as you say, I think historically as outsourcing lawyers, we would say, you know, there's some key things you have to put in your contracts, but you'd probably have them in your contracts anyway. But now that the regulators have said more explicitly, these are some of the rules that we expect you to follow and have captured in your contracts, it does change the dynamic of those negotiations. So
it definitely does, and particularly, as you say, with the newer entrants into the market, you know, I have a lot of sympathy in some cases because it's a lot, but you know, it's the balance there between, if you want to play in that space, you need to be ready to play. So it's but yeah, that can be some of the trickier negotiations.
Yeah, and I think you see some of that. I mean, it's true, and this maybe is a segue into Anne. Part of the challenge can be for the customer side is really understanding the technology and what it does and what the issues are, but there is a duty on kind of a responsibility or an impetus on the supplier side to actually explain yourself. And so what we see, at least in financial services, kind of service providers really getting much more informed, because they know they need to be informed in order to sell the services into that sector. But I've started to see that, and too on the AI side or ad tech side, people who've got complicated technology, they really have to make more of an effort to help explain what the product does and does not do, because otherwise when it gets into the legal teams, there's a potential you'll raise a whole host of issues because, you know, it's not clear from the business or the provider what it does and what it doesn't do, and it might be actually much less complicated and scary than it might seem on on first light. So yeah, coming to you, Anne, I wanted to ask you particularly about AI. Obviously, it continues to be a hugely hot topic. There's a lot of activity around AI and machine learning in business, but it's also understandably been another busy year with continued legal scrutiny on AI, and we've had new developments in the EU and in the UK. So for you, what would you call out as being the most significant developments affecting the regulation of AI this year, and how are you seeing companies practically approach AI projects given all these uncertainties?
Well, I think the EU AI Act obviously is the first mover in this whole area of regulation. So obviously that's a really key development for everybody, and I think the whole world has been watching, and invariably as the first mover it will have advantage. So and that takes a quite an interesting approach, almost like a product liability type approach, with the developer, the producer, having to be accountable and try to obtain certification. But the UK, I think, is inevitably going to have to follow that, but try to come up with a more effective, holistic regulatory regime. And that's the stated position of the UK government in its national strategy, AI strategy paper that's just recently been issued. And I think the idea is that we will make the UK a more a friendly place for developers and investors in AI regulation, and actually come up with a regulatory environment which hopefully will support development and customers. But it's all still very much up in the air. The UK government white paper will not come out until the new year, with actual detailed proposals for regulation. But I think we're looking at having a central domain neutral regulator that will sit across all the different areas of AI regulation, but invariably each of the sector regulators will also continue to be very much responsible for regulation of AI in their area. So I think for customers, it is going to be quite a challenge to continue to stay abreast of their own sector-specific regulation, as well as this more general domain neutral regulation. And I think that continues to create uncertainty for both developers and customers alike. Very difficult for the legal teams to be keeping abreast and actually trying to anticipate where the regulation will go. So I think at this point in time, all that customers, buyers of AI services can really be doing is looking very carefully at their own sector-specific regulation, understanding how AI operates, and the transparency obligations and other obligations posed by their own sector-specific regulation, making sure those requirements are known to the suppliers of AI, so that when they're going into contract negotiations, the suppliers understand what those specific regulatory obligations on their customers are. So that it doesn't come out at a late stage in the contract negotiations and you have a complete disconnect between what the developer thinks it is providing and what the customer is anticipating. So I think because nobody knows what the future regulation will be, it's going to be very difficult and challenging to future-proof regulatory compliance in contracts. Customers expecting suppliers to be able to future-proof those contracts. I think that will be a challenging contract negotiation. So consideration needs to be given in contracts to how changes in regulation will be dealt with through change control process and discussion. I don't think it's possible from a contractual perspective to actually fully future-proof these things. And I think the big challenge, as was alluded to before, is just understanding the technology, and in practice, customers don't necessarily have the level of understanding of the technology. And, as lawyers, it's incumbent on us to try and upskill ourselves, which is a challenge. As part of the SCL, we're actually doing a great deal, hopefully, to to help people. We're running workshops next year and so on and so forth. But I think it will continue to be a challenge for all of us for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think, lots of us have been poring over the EU AI regulation and wondering how much change there's going to be to it as it goes through the processes. Because I've certainly seen people call out the fact that at the moment a calculator would probably be caught by the definition and all these kind of things that you can kind of understand why so many regulators around the world want to make sure that AI does not bring with it a whole set of harms that have not been properly mitigated by having proper rules in place. And I think a lot of people, I don't know if you all agree, but I think we've had so much guidance come out over the last few years around AI, it's almost impossible to keep up with all the guidance and the self-regulation and all that. And actually people are often crying out for actually more clear-cut rules, but obviously those rules have to be sensible. And I think you're right that the UK are, they've kind of looked at what the EU is doing, but think maybe we should be taking a slightly different tack. So
and taking
inhibit the tech itself by being too heavy-handed.
Yeah, and taking input from wider interest groups as well, ensuring that there are opportunities for those impact assessments to be undertaken initially and on a continuing basis, and actually encouraging all of that stakeholder engagement. But I don't think regulation's not moving quickly on this one.
Yeah, exactly. And I think what we're seeing in the meantime, perhaps in organizations which may be sensible, is kind of coming up with their own rules about, what they will use and won't use and how they will properly protect against any risks around that. But it's always making it practical that's the challenge.
Yeah, and I think it's looking at who the supplier is, who's in the supply chain, and looking at their financial stability. Are they going to be able to deal with changes in regulation and compliance? So it's not just a question of looking at the technology, but really doing that due diligence on the supplier and the supply chain.
Yeah,
which is interesting because it, all the things that we're talking about here are things that we grapple with in technology generally. And I think it's quite interesting, isn't it, that it's almost like AI, we need to kind of remember, I suppose, that it is a technology contract at the end of the day, and things that Anne's picking out, in terms of the specifics around thinking, well, okay, it might not be a standard change control, it might need to be a bit more nuanced because of this technology, are the last whatever % of the contract, not the whole thing. And I remember hearing someone saying, oh, just rip up the contract and start again. I thought, no, we've got tech procurement contracts here. It's about then bringing in the specific points you raise, Anne, and augmenting what we already do rather than starting again.
Yeah, and looking at how understanding that the structure shouldn't be that different, but liability provisions need to be thought of in that different context, that it's not it's much more nuanced, and the traditional approach to liability just needs to be thought through quite carefully.
I think you're both right in that I think the technology can scare people off sometimes, that it's so new and different, whether it's AI or blockchain or some other technology, but the fundamentals, as you say, there's a lot of analogous, circumstances that we've tackled different technologies over the years. And there's specific additional issues, but a lot of the core issues are the same. It's just with something like AI, particularly machine learning, or some of the blockchain type projects, there's much more collaboration. It's not necessarily a traditional supplier customer arrangement that, you just need to be clear about who's doing what and where those touch points are. And but I think I always think that, we're good people to ask lots of questions, because quite often I feel that the business or the technical people maybe aren't always aligned, but people don't like, people sometimes don't go, get to the basics and ask really basic questions. I assume everybody knows what's going on, and when you really drill down to it, sometimes you find out that it's actually not complex AI at all. It's a very basic software program. There's been a bit of puff around it, and it's not actually that complicated, but no one wants to ask those questions, I think, but the lawyers can, right? Because we can play dumb a bit and say, really, explain at a core level what this does or what the process is, and then everybody's illuminated as a result of us being that intermediary kind of.
Yeah, I think the practical challenge probably for us as lawyers is getting in sort of early enough to ask those questions, isn't it? I think it's how do we get in and influence at those early stages to make sure the right questions are asked at the early procurement stage.
Yeah, I think that's right. And even like when you see pilots, I don't know if this is your experience, but you see pilots or proof of concepts. My number one question is always, why are we doing this? like what's the problem we're trying to solve? What's the driver? But again, sometimes nobody's really asked that, and that's helpful context, I think, as a lawyer, because if you understand that actually we're kind of doing it as an experiment, we want to test out the technology, we want to see what it does, that's really important to know. Whereas if the concept is, no, we think this will work, we absolutely want to move quickly from evaluation into development and live, that's also helpful. But some of these projects are still more like experiments. And so that's helpful. I find that at least helpful context.
Yeah. They are, and I think AI is a great example of one of those technologies that's just so mystical, and it is. I mean, everything is an AI product these days, right? But it's only by asking the types of probing questions that you're referring to, Sue, that we can get to the bottom of it and say, oh, actually, this is just a slightly glamorous software contract or software development agreement, or whatever it might be. So all of those basic principles that you were talking about, Yvonne, they would all apply, right? So it's only the top layer that is actually new per se, and might fall into the AI bucket, and therefore might fall into draft AI Act type territory.
Yeah. Savannah makes an interesting point in the chat as well, which is, and it actually next year, as part of our SCL program, we're going to be looking at the future of, the future of IP, for example, is one of the things we want to look at next year. And Shavana makes the good point that, the IP policymakers are also looking at, what does, technology like AI do for IP ownership? Who owns property if it's created ultimately by another technology? And we're also seeing this with the sort of this craze for NFTs, which is, again, like, what are we actually owning, and are we being clear? And there's consumer protection issues all around that, in terms of are we creating new rights, and how are we going to document, ownership over sort of these intangible assets. I saw today, I don't know if anyone saw, I just thought this is kind of jump the shark territory. So we know we're definitely in an NFT bubble. Is Melania Trump just announced she's launching a series of NFTs to raise money, in theory, for children, I think, but a proportion of the profits go to the charitable. But that's kind of, we've had Paris Hilton, now we've got Melania getting in on the act. So who knows who'll be next on the NFT craze? But it does raise, I think, these kind of new developments do raise some interesting legal issues. And so, Shavana, you're absolutely right. We should keep an eye on what's going to come out next year, I think, in terms of, we've had some developments already, but I think we'll continue to get developments around, what is really new. There are things that, as we say, are not that new, it's just a new application, but there are some new interesting areas, I think, for all of us to keep an eye out for. So I'm going to go back to you, Karishma. So we kind of already teased a few things, right? So next year, we've obviously had this huge amount of activity this year on data protection, but now next year, right, we've got a new information commissioner. We've got the prospect of data protect. I mean, everyone's maybe going, please no, we've had enough. But the prospect of new data protection reform in the UK because of this new data strategy and the government wanting to, make data sharing easier, more straightforward. What do you think we should all be looking out for? Do you expect a revolution in data protection in the UK post Brexit now with these developments, or do you think it's probably more of the same? I don't know what you think is going to happen next year.
So personally, I'm hoping there is no revolution. The dust is only just settled with everyone having implemented their GDPR compliance framework and thinking they can get onto the more exciting technology and processes, and now they're being dragged back into compliance land again. I would say that 2021 has done a good job in laying the foundation for what we can expect in 2022, because a lot of the themes that we saw during the course of this year haven't been concluded, or at least haven't been concluded neatly. So I think we're still going to see increasing regulatory pressure on big tech. So the Lux DPA case against Amazon hasn't been concluded yet. We still haven't seen the outcome of the Irish DPA's case against Facebook. And I think this will just rumble on. And for everyone out there who's not big tech, it's just a case of watching and learning from the apparent mistakes, according to the regulators, that are being made in the space, so that you can get ahead of the curve, as it were, and fix any similar or analogous situations that you might have. Cross-border data transfers, again, that's going to rumble on, particularly for the UK, as the ICO finalises its draft of its version of the cross-border data transfer contracts and TIAs and similar mechanisms. And also companies who have got binding corporate rules in place or are considering BCR should keep an eye out for the EDPB's updated BCR requirements, which are also anticipated in 2022. Data breach is an interesting one, because that one has been, I mean, that's obviously one of the more headline grabbing issues, but with people increasingly working from home over the last 18 months, that's just exposed organizations to more vulnerabilities, more security vulnerabilities. And again, we're seeing the types of data breaches that are hitting the headlines are the bigger and more widespread ones. And the latest one last week is apparently one that will affect most organizations in the world who use some form of legacy software, which is a little bit worrying. But as far as I know, no breaches have been reported from that yet. But I think it's indicative of a trend that organizations will be focusing even more on their data security measures. And then finally, I think on the ad tech front, again, it's a bit more of the same, in that we are expecting to see more guidance from regulators. The ever elusive e-privacy directive, I don't know if it's ever going to end up being updated. It's been on the cards for the last 4 years, but regulators certainly aren't shying away from enforcing it as it currently stands. So that's pretty low-hanging fruit in terms of compliance measures that organizations could be taking. And also, given the way that data protection developments have played out over the last couple of years, all of the points I've mentioned, I reckon, are probably just the tip of the iceberg for what we can expect in the next 12 months. So yeah, we'll see.
Gonna have a busy year. Yeah, I mean, and the other thing I've seen recently, and I know continues, I mean, hopefully drives the right behavior, is, you know, we've had a very, for anyone in the tech law space that works with their corporate colleagues on M&A and strategic investments and those types of projects, that obviously there's a lot of activity in the M&A space in the tech world. There's, you know, you see the big tech companies, you know, done well during the pandemic, got some money to play with. They are doing a lot of acquisitions. There are also companies that have not been doing quite so well, maybe some of the public sector focused tech providers and doing divestments. But there's also these, you know, very successful high growth startups that have become scale ups and are now consolidating. And particularly in that space, you know, if you start as a small company, then you're not in the you're not in the headlights of the regulators, and naturally your compliance regime is maybe not quite as established and mature as others. So certainly what I'm seeing is a lot more scrutiny around data privacy on M&A deals, which again should, you know, that flows through, right? Because you know, companies that are looking to get investment in, you know, I'm sure are doing preparatory sort of internal due diligence to try and fix some of those gaps. So I think in all the different flavors of tech law and the work we do, data is certainly, you know, big hot topic, and I'm sure will continue to be, as you say. So going to you, Yvonne, obviously busy. It's been a busy year. as we said, I think fintechs have done really well during the pandemic because we've moved to digital payments. We've seen financial services companies continuing to get more comfortable going to the cloud, and they know they need to digitally transform. But do you have any predictions in terms of the things that you think are going to, that we know that might come out next year, or that we think might likely to be big topics as I don't know, I don't know if I should predict, but as we maybe come out of the pandemic at some point?
Let's hope so. Nice. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I think we're aligned on a couple of those that you've mentioned already. I think, I think in terms of areas, potentially hot areas of fintech next year, I would perhaps put open banking with the slight lifting of the tone with question. I think, since open banking was launched, there have been some accusations that it's all a bit of a damp squib and all of that kind of stuff. But it does, I don't think that's necessarily fair. It continues to develop, new products and services continue to emerge. And I think it's quite important to flag, well, my view anyway, that open banking isn't really the thing that you should focus on. That's a wee bit like focusing on electricity or plumbing. It's what you do with it that matters, and it's the products and services that are involved that it can support and develop that matter. And I think we're seeing more of them coming to the fore, and some changes in some of the techie rules around re-authentication, which I won't bore everyone with, but the bottom line is that it's intended to reduce friction, to make it easier for people to adopt open banking methodologies, and not as faffy, to use a technical term, when you're having to re-authenticate and go through. Nobody wants to do that, so that's got better. So that will be interesting to see how that plays through. And I think linked to that was the point that you were making, Stu, around e-commerce, digital payments. The pandemic obviously has accelerated trends there. I mean, look at the pace by which the contactless limit increased over the last couple of years compared to how quickly or not it had increased before. So fast, reliable payment solutions are going to be quite hot. I think there's also new areas like the whole buy now, pay later. Well, that's not a new area, but the regulation of buy now, pay later. There's a consultation out at the moment that closes early January, so it'll be interesting to see how that plays through. Different topic altogether, but ESG is a huge topic. Big focus for financial services, like many other sectors, but a real opportunity, I think, for fintechs to support and potentially provide solutions. We think about fintechs perhaps supporting on aggregation of the data and reporting that will have to be done. There are quite interesting fintech type solutions around measuring carbon footprint and things like that. So loads to go at there. And then I guess I would just mention crypto, because I couldn't not, but it feels like here we go again. Having still incredible volatility in that market, but there is a real sense that that's going to keep rising up the agenda again. You've talked about that already, and we've got Melania making her first foray into that we know of. So there we go. I think interesting to see whether the sector actually lobbies for a bit more regulation with a view to perhaps looking a bit more acceptable and less scary and risky. I don't know, but I saw the BBC reporting last week that football clubs have made hundreds of millions of pounds selling these crypto fan tokens. And although that's a fairly small beer at the moment, at the other end of the scale, we've got the Bank of England exploring central bank digital currency and digital money and all of these things. So, that is definitely going to be an interesting one to watch. And I suppose you mentioned cloud. I mean, cloud is almost like, again, the pipes that everything runs on now. But, I think a further push into the cloud by financial services will be definitely on the cards. I think COVID has helped to accelerate quite a lot of that thinking and the flexibility, accessibility it provides. So I think, and because of the collaboration and some of the deals that you've been alluding to, Sue, I think that cloud is just becoming intrinsic to so much of that. So I think that will be a trend as well in the space. So yeah, ready to go out again.
tons to go. I mean, that's the thing. What's
Absolutely.
interesting is if you looked back a few years ago, the sort of, the fintech disruptors, well, the fintech disruptors now want to be banks, and the banks have added in all these, new features, created sometimes their own digital bank. So they're kind of getting closer together. And then if I think about crypto, the libertarian crypto folk who are like, we're just don't need banks anymore, we'll just have crypto. Well, now the banks want to, hold crypto as custody. They want to use crypto. So it's a bit of convergence in the middle. It's quite interesting, I think. We'll have to see how that goes now. And I'm going to come over to you to talk about the future of AI, and then I'm going to see if we've got some broader questions that we can ask you. So Anne, obviously lots of focus on AI during 2021. You've already said that we're expecting more developments in 2022. Maybe at this point I can say, how, and it's come through in the Q&A as well, how on earth, as a tech lawyer who doesn't just do AI, but does, outsourcing cloud, data privacy, how do you keep up with
Good question.
the law
I think
and also the tech? Like, do you have any top tips for the audience, like sites or resources?
top tips.
How do you
SCL, obviously, and just on AI, we're actually holding a workshop around about June next year on AI that will actually have some really good case studies on how AI is actually being deployed in practice. We'll obviously talk about the developments in regulation and the law generally. So obviously that is a really good means of keeping up to date. Otherwise, I follow lots of really great people on Twitter and LinkedIn, professors from Queen Mary, LSE, Imperial, some really good people. I always like to see what they're saying. Makes it much more interesting than just following the UK government or the EU Commission website. So yeah, it's a constant challenge. And then just reading things like Computer Weekly just for updates in tech. But it is impossible to stay up to speed with everything all of the time. I just think in reality none of us can do that. So you just have to, whenever you're approaching a new technology, a new solution, remind yourself of what the state of the current law, and ask as many questions of helpful technologists as you possibly can. They always like to talk about their technology, so I always just ask lots and lots of questions, really.
Yeah, I think that's right. It's the network as well. I also find social media incredibly helpful because the regulators are there, the academics, as you say, are there. So are the leading journalists in the tech space, and that's usually where I find news. Yesterday, I had a call with somebody about advertising and marketing around crypto because he'd seen a post I wrote. Well, I checked that morning, and lo and behold, the Advertising Standards Agency had come out with 7 rulings that day. So I quickly, read those, make sure I was up to date. But I found that out just by trusty old Google and BBC News and making sure that it was up to date.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll ask you, Yvonne and Karishma, do you have any top tips for the audience? How do you keep up to date with financial services and fintech related stuff, Yvonne? Do you have a go-to resource?
Obviously, it would be remiss of me not to say pinsentmasons.com/outlong and the shameless.
You need like a P in the corner. No, you're absolutely right. I'm sure it's a very helpful resource.
It is indeed,
for lots of people.
And obviously, frankly, because we employ journalists to go away and find the new things, it saves me having to go and find a lot of them. So yes, very helpful. So that obviously as well. I mean, I use, from a sort of legal point of view, I use Lexology a ton, which means that I should probably say thank you to all of you, because it's that is a great aggregator of content from across all the law firms, and I think that's a fantastic resource. And then in the financial services space, just for news and what's going on and developments, I use sites like FinExtra and Computer Weekly that Anne's mentioned, and other areas as well. So it's all of that, the FT, and we get, I'm sure you guys do too, get an aggregation of stories of things that affect sectors and clients we're involved in. So I can scan that, and I also have Google searches for particular keywords, like clients, or words like outsourcing or cloud, and that's been incredibly helpful, just sometimes just to pick out things, particularly changes in other jurisdictions that you might not necessarily pick up right away. It just happens to come through. So all of that really, but I agree with Anne. You can't always keep up with everything. It's just it's sprinkling enough out there, and then if you need to follow up on something, you can do that deeper dive.
Yeah, and I would also encourage people. I mean, maybe you all do this as well, but I think we're very fortunate that actually what we do is very it's a hot topic in culture, right? So as well as all the things we've talked about, I mean, I'm loving, and I highly recommend people the Theranos podcast.
Oh yes.
At the moment, because they're following the trial, and it's just incredibly interesting. And I'd recommend the Crypto Queen podcast on BBC. And
yes, we're at one here.
Yeah, and they did a fabulous one about very well-known ransomware attack, and that just becomes a very interesting podcast about Korea. So that, I think that's a nice thing for us, and maybe for some of the students in the audience, is there's very accessible ways into what we do as lawyers through TV shows, podcasts, and kind of more relaxing media perhaps than reading a journal or an article. What about you, Karishma? Is anything that you do that the others have not mentioned that we should do?
Well, I mean, my biggest sources of information are Twitter and podcasts. So, and all of those have been mentioned. On the SCL plug front, so the Privacy and Data Protection Group is having our annual update on the 27th of January this year, which is always good fun. And an excellent way of keeping up to date with what's going on in the law, because we normally have some very well-esteemed barristers giving us the lowdown on the latest from the front lines in the courts. So I would encourage all of you to sign up to that.
Yeah, and I think as SCL, just broad plug, we are settling our sort of schedule of events for the year, and I know as an insider we've got some really interesting sessions coming up on a whole range of topics, including digital media, privacy, AI, sourcing, but also other broader topics like legal tech and well-being, and of course the SCL Women in Tech Law Group. We've got various events planned for next year, including in January, we're going to do the second of our SCL Women in Tech Law around the world, and we're going to do focus on APAC. So I guess, again, this is a plug. If you know somebody that you think would be a fantastic speaker for that, the lineup is not entirely finalized yet, so do let me know. The plan is we will be having a mix of in-house and private practice lawyers from the APAC region, which obviously is a very large region, to join us, just to explain, what are they tackling locally, and it's quite nice to see the kind of issues that they're looking at, and how, if they're similar or different to what we're looking at over here. I'm conscious there's only a few minutes to go. I'd like to ask a sort of more personal question, as it's the run up to Christmas and it's been a tricky year. But please do, audience, ask any other questions you have through the Q&A. But I'd be interested to know, because somebody asked me this the other day, and it was quite tricky. They said, Sue, what's your news of the year? And I thought, well, honestly, apart from being on holiday once, the pandemic kind of curtailed some of the things I would normally do that would be highlights, like, earlier in the year going to the theatre or an art exhibition or whatever. So I was going to ask you guys, outside of your day job, and the law, what's been your personal highlight of the year? And also, obviously subject to restrictions, what are you most looking forward to yourself in 2022? Maybe I'll start with you, Anne.
Oh, well, my personal highlight was actually getting out of the country. I left the country and went to Sicily for 4 days. That was just amazing. It was wonderful just getting away from the computer for a few days and seeing some ancient civilization and eating good food.
I'm with you. I don't like to read. Like, I love to read, but I find it hard to read because we read so much for our jobs. But I went on a holiday to Greece in October and I read 5 books in a week, and it was fabulous. Just to, as you say, put down the computer read some books and be somewhere other than your office. What about you, Yvonne? What was the highlight of your year?
The highlight of my year was when President Biden said that we could travel to the US again, and because I have a place over there that I haven't seen since January 2020, and I'm very keen to see it again. So yeah, that.
Have you been yet, or are you going?
Pardon?
Have you been yet, or are you going? I
haven't been yet, because obviously the opening up in early November was not compatible with the life of a tech lawyer leading up to Christmas. So, as you all know, so I'm currently planning to go on the 28th of December. So I think if we can cross any available body parts, that would be helpful. So yeah, and that is also my hope for next year, that I might get out there a bit more.
That's your highlight, and whereabouts in the US is your place?
East Coast, so in Cape Cod, just in Massachusetts. So
nice.
It's very nice.
I'm very envious of that. That would be very nice. What about you, Karishma? What was the highlight for you in 2021?
Not as glamorous as everybody else's, I'm afraid. So mine was just last year I did zero socializing outside of my household after the first lockdown struck. So this year I was very excited to see friends and colleagues and extended family in real life. And then next year I've got all body parts crossed, Yvonne, that we can all go traveling.
Yes.
Because I feel like we are long overdue an exotic holiday.
Yeah, I think that's true for everyone. I mean, I think that's what pandemic has certainly shown me, is that I miss people, because I don't know about your organizations, but we were going back 2 days a week until the recent announcement, and it was just so fantastic to see people in real life, catch up with them, spend time with them. And same with travel. That was the one thing, and going abroad in October. And even I was in Glasgow last week, and it was just lovely to be away from the small part of the country that I've spent a year and a half in. So I'm sure it's the same for everyone. And I wish you all, hopefully, a very relaxing, restful Christmas, and that you get your highlights of 2022. And I'm sure the same for the attendees who joined us today. It has been a busy year for everyone, I know, and so I think everyone definitely could deserve a break. But aren't we lucky that I think we do have technology which has connected us, and that's certainly what we found at the SCL. We have some fantastic members who've both attended and put on and spoken at events during the year, which has meant that we still felt like a strong community, even if we can't quite get back together physically this year, but hopefully next year we will start that again. So I think on that note, I will give a big thanks. I know it's a really busy time of the year, so we really appreciate it. Thank you, Anne, Karishma and Yvonne, for joining us and doing this sort of reflections on 2021, look forward to 2022. For people who've attended today who are not SCL members, then obviously we would love you to join. Please go to the website for information, and particularly for students, a reminder that it's free membership for students. We love for you to join the community early, so please check that out. And we have got lots of events coming up, so we hope to see you next year for some of those events. But in the meantime, if you do want to get more involved in women in tech law in particular, or speak at a future session, we always love new speakers, new experiences. So please do feel free to email me or contact SCL if you're up for getting involved. But otherwise, thank you so much for joining us today. And on behalf of SCL, I just want to wish you all a very Merry Christmas, happy holidays. I hope you all stay safe and get to achieve what you want over the holiday season, and you have a fantastic 2022. And we'll see you all again soon, hopefully. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.